Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the new poll that was just released for the Nevada Senate election. Nevada is, in my opinion, going to be the #1 most important Senate race that we have because honestly, Nevada is going to be the tipping point state. It is going to be the state that decides whether or not Democrats are going to retain a majority in the Senate. I think if Democrats win Nevada, they will win a majority. If they do not win this race with Catherine Cortez Masto as the incumbent, it is very likely that Republicans are going to take back control of the upper chamber. So the most recent Senate poll from Nevada shows Catherine Cortez Masto ahead of Adam Laxalt by a margin of 7%. This is a very significant margin. Suffolk University is a B+ rated pollster, and so this poll has expanded Masto's margin on average to 3 percentage points. And looking at the 2022 map, if we do fill in many of these states that are probably going to go to the Republicans, so Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, they're probably going to go red, and in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire, you do start to see just how important Nevada is going to be. If Democrats win Nevada, they win the Senate. If they lose Nevada, they will have to win in Georgia, but losing in Nevada basically means that they're not going to win in Georgia because, of course, Georgia is still significantly more red than Nevada. So the Nevada Senate election is definitely a winnable race. Catherine Cortez Masto here is running for her second term in office after first being elected in 2016. This seat was left open by the retiring Majority Leader Harry Reid, who was elected in 2010 by a margin of 6%. In 2016, of course, we saw just a 2-point margin for Masto, and in 2022, the margin is likely to be even smaller for Democrats. However, Nevada overall is a state that does lean slightly in favor of the Democratic Party. If we look at the last couple of presidential elections in the state in 2016, Hillary Clinton won Nevada by 2.4%. 2020, the same margin for Joe Biden. In 2012, Obama won Nevada by 6.7% and a margin of 12.5% in 2008. Of course, 2008, the map was very good for Democrats basically nationwide, but in 2004, George W. Bush did win the state of Nevada by 2.6% against John Kerry, and he also won it in 2000 against Al Gore. So Nevada was a very competitive race for a very long time. In the 90s, of course, it voted for Bill Clinton, but before that, it was also a Bush Sr. state as well as a Reagan state. So Nevada in recent years has become more Democratic. However, in just the last couple of elections, it is getting a bit more competitive. So if we do look at the Nevada Senate election, I would say the Democrats do go into this race with a slight advantage, but with the national environment favoring Republicans, it is going to be difficult for Catherine Cortez Masto to win her re-election. However, there is good news for Masto. If you look at the approval rating of Joe Biden in the state, he has a net negative approval rating of 12%. Currently, this question here, this is the same Suffolk poll, asked voters whether or not they view Joe Biden favorably. 41% of voters in Nevada have a positive opinion of Joe Biden, while 53% of voters have a negative opinion of the current president. And so basically what this means is that despite Nevada being a negative 12% environment for Democrats, at least according to Joe Biden's approval as the metric, Catherine Cortez Masto is outperforming the president by 19 points as Masto leads by 7 in the most recent poll. Now, if we do look at the other poll that was conducted this month, this was the Trafalgar Group poll, they had Adam Laxalt actually leading by a margin of 2%. However, Trafalgar is notorious for overestimating Republicans. If you look at the polls for the 2018 race between Jackie Rosen and Dean Heller, you'll see the final poll showed that Dean Heller was going to win by 3%. This is the final Trafalgar poll, but of course, in the very end, the results were a flip for Democrats. Jackie Rosen won by 5%, outperforming expectations according to Trafalgar by 8 whole percentage points. And so in Nevada, polls are not known to overestimate that much. Yes, in 2020, Joe Biden did do slightly worse than expected, but if you do look at the 2018 Senate race, and this was for a midterm election, Jackie Rosen basically outperformed every single expectation that polls had for her. And now coming back to the poll, of course, it asked voters also how they felt about Catherine Cortez Masto, and currently she is viewed positively overall. Again, we're going to look at this total column. 46% of voters view positively Catherine Cortez Masto, 39% have a negative opinion of her. So in a state as purple as Nevada, a +7 net approval is not all that bad. And looking at the favorables for Adam Laxalt, we can now see why he is not doing so well. Only 34% of Nevada voters view him favorably, 41% have a negative opinion of the Republican challenger, so he has a net -7 approval rating in the state, basically the opposite of what Masto has. And so this is a worrying sign for Republicans. Of course, if you look at the map as a whole, Democrats are only winning in Pennsylvania and Arizona because of the candidates that Republicans have put in these states. If this was a more generic year with more generic candidates, Republicans should definitely be winning in Pennsylvania. This is a seat that they currently hold, while in Arizona, the race should be much more competitive than it is. Yes, Mark Kelly is a good incumbent, but Blake Masters, as the Republican nominee, is just making this race too easy of a win for Democrats. In Pennsylvania, of course, Mehmet Oz is probably the worst candidate that Republicans have put on the ballot this November. And in Georgia, I mean, this was a state that voted for Donald Trump by 5% in 2016. It should be a very easy pickup for Republicans, but Herschel Walker is making this state very, very competitive, and honestly, that is very good news for Democrats, because of course, if they lose in Nevada, Georgia could also be a reliable alternative. In Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina, these three races should all be likely Republican, but they are only lean, because in Wisconsin, you have Ron Johnson, one of the most unpopular incumbents in the country. In Ohio, J.D. Vance is performing terribly against Tim Ryan, and of course in North Carolina, Sherry Beasley is actually taking the polling lead against Ted Budd in this race. And so this just goes to show you how important candidate quality can be. Even on the Senate floor a couple of days ago, Mitch McConnell himself said that candidate quality is going to affect Republicans negatively in this race. That's basically what he implied. And the candidates that we're seeing right now are similar to the Tea Party candidates that we saw in 2010 and 2012 that the Republicans nominated. If you look at the 2010 Senate elections, yes, they did flip 6 seats overall, but this was a winnable year for the GOP. They could have won a majority if they chose better nominees. In 2012, the same story. Democrats did win the majority once again, with Barack Obama winning re-election, but the Republican Party really could have won the Senate majority. I mean, Democrats even won in North Dakota, and of course, Jon Tester won re-election in Montana. So not that great of a year for Republicans. It would not be until 2014 that Republicans would win back the upper chamber after 6 years of Barack Obama controlling the Senate under his presidency. So if we do look at the 2022 nomination for Nevada, Adam Laxalt won 56% of the vote. Sam Brown did surprisingly well, surging at the very end, making this a 20-point race. Now, Sam Brown, I think, would have been a better candidate. He did poll better against Catherine Cortez Masto than Adam Laxalt, but with the endorsement of Donald Trump, Laxalt was basically guaranteed to win. And looking at the Democratic side, Catherine Cortez Masto, of course, easily won her renomination with 91% of the vote. Now, the next thing I want to look at is fundraising for this race, another metric in which Democrats have a significant lead in. Looking at the numbers for Masto and Laxalt, Catherine Cortez Masto currently has raised $29 million for her re-election campaign. Laxalt has raised $7.2 million in his race to challenge the incumbent. And so the important metric that we want to look at here is small individual contributions. Masto has raised $10.9 million from just small contributions of less than $200. And basically what this means is that the more money you get from these small contributions, the more grassroots support you would have. Of course, this is the metric that Bernie Sanders did very well in both his primaries. Adam Laxalt, on the other hand, has raised $1.2 million from small individual contributions. So you're seeing a lot more support overall for Masto, at least in terms of financial aid. The betting markets also have Masto up by a very slight margin. Catherine Cortez Masto currently leads with a 2% margin in the betting markets against Laxalt, 50-50, and I mean the markets have been very close recently, but just a couple of months ago, Laxalt had a 64% chance at flipping the seat. That clearly is not the case anymore. And if we look at the 538 forecasts, of course, overall Democrats maintain their 63% chance at winning. If I reload, it's going to stay at 63. This was updated 6 hours ago as of recording. And if you look at the state of Nevada, Masto has a 58% chance at winning her re-election. The odds have gone up for her over the last couple of months, very similar to what we're seeing in the betting markets if we look at both graphs. And if you look at the margin of victory for Masto, currently it sits at 49.2 for the Democrat to 47.7. So essentially a margin of 1.5%. Still a very close race between Masto and so in my opinion, Nevada is again going to be the tipping point, but also going to be probably the closest election that we have, with the exception of Georgia. I think the margin could be a bit lower in Georgia, but the race is really going to determine the majority, in my opinion, is going to be Nevada. So we also have a governor election in the Silver State as well. Steve Sisolak versus Joe Lombardo. Sisolak is running for re-election as the Democratic governor elected in 2018. He won by 5%, basically the same margin as Jackie Rosen. And if you look at the governor election polls for 2022, Sisolak leads by 1.5%. So Masto is doing slightly better than her Democratic counterpart in the governor election, but overall, Sisolak has actually been polling better and is slightly more popular than Masto. The reason why Sisolak's numbers are a bit lower is because the poll that had Masto up by 7 only had Sisolak up by 3 against Lombardo, so Democrats may be losing the governor race, but if you do look at the 530 forecast, they do actually have a better chance at winning here, with Steve Sisolak having a 61% chance at winning. Now, the interesting thing I want to look at is the 530 forecast based on the polls alone. If you only look at polling, Masto has a 64% chance at winning, so not that big of a difference, but it does make Nevada a lean state according to their forecast. So that'll be it for this video. I mean, the overall point here is that Nevada is going to be more important nationwide than it has ever been. It is going to be the state that decides whether or not Democrats win the majority. I currently have both Nevada and Georgia basically as pure toss-ups. Yes, Democrats are leading in the polls and a 3-point margin is significant, but also Democrats are probably not going to fare as well as they did in 2018, especially in a state that only barely voted for Joe Biden. And of course, in 2020, Biden did not even do any better than Hillary Clinton, and Biden was thought to be a much better candidate than her. So Nevada is going to be a pretty close race. We're just going to have to see what happens in the next 2 months between Masto and Laxalt. Adam Laxalt is not as bad of a candidate as the other candidates that we're seeing, like Blake Masters in Arizona, Herschel Walker in Georgia, or Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. Laxalt does have a chance, a very good chance at that, but as of right now, the incumbent is still very slightly favored in my opinion, and that's what basically most political pundits have Nevada as. It goes from being lean to tilt Democratic, but also a toss-up according to many sources as well. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below whether or not you think Catherine Cortez Masto will be reelected in Nevada, and also your thoughts on the governor election between Steve Sisolak and Joe Lombardo. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I also have channel memberships for just 99 cents per month. Consider getting one of those for special perks on this channel as we enter the next 2 months, and of course the midterm elections in November, and I will see you guys in the next video.